Hey guys, I bought Civ 6 on sale a month back and I've been having a great time with it. One thing I appreciate is that it gets back to what we saw in Civ 4, where the developers were taking things that were unpopular in the franchise and trying their best to fix them. Civ 6 definitely has a problem solving attitude in how it's made, and I'd like to talk about one specific problem that has been persistent within the franchise that Civ 6 has managed to solve: the expansion problem. The expansion problem goes something like this. One city in Civilization is good. Why is 20 cities not 20 times as good? Civ is a game where cities do things. In some games, they basically don't, but in Civ, they provide a lot of benefits. If these benefits scale in a logical way, then players will scramble to take all the decent land. And naturally, some players will have more land, and if every city at the margin provides the same benefit as your starting city, then the people with just a couple more cities will compound their advantage into an inevitable victory. Snowballing like that might be fine for a fast game, but a game of Civ should ideally take 10 hours, and we don't like feeling that the game is decided as soon as all the land is taken. Additionally, players just don't like when all the land on the map is taken by 500 BC. It's not realistic, and beyond that, players like to do other things other than expand at the start of the game. They like to build wonders of the world or courthouses in their capital. They have other things they want to be doing. They don't like being forced to expand as soon as they can. So there needs to be some sort of system to stop this. Civ 3 used diminishing returns, the corruption system. Faraway cities can be seen as decentralized colonies or puppet states. They're useful for other things like military positioning, as you'll see with Ganaga here, and resources, but they don't build things or give you a lot of commerce. In the past 2 weeks, I've become hyper aware of all the slap fighting going on between fans of the newer Civ games. Civ 6 does seem to have its vocal contingency of haters. The Civ 5 fans seem pretty self-aware about the faults of their game. For expansion, for example, their system is a 5% cost increase to all tax and cultural policies per city you found, on top of the global happiness system. Together, that is pretty brutal, and the fans that I talked to said the community patches were needed to fix the game. But for some reason, the Civ 4 fans are just so smug, acting like their game fixed the corruption issues from Civ 3. In Civ 4, if you don't remember, if there's just a couple too many tempting city spots that you want to secure and you build those cities, you just go bankrupt due to the city maintenance system, and you can't research any technology. Now, that's certainly a system, and if you don't like Civ 2 or Civ 3 because you have to constantly be cranking out settlers too fast to keep up, I could see why you like the system in Civ 4. But you'll notice that the systems in Civ 4 and Civ 5 are penalties. Cities don't just become less useful. Having a couple additional cities can ruin your game. And that feels awful. This isn't XCOM, this isn't City Skyline, this is a 4X game, and one of those X's is for expand. People play this franchise because they like empire building. Expansion should feel good. Bigger should not guarantee a win, but a bigger nation should at least be slightly better. Maybe not better enough to justify the costs of expansion, but expanding successfully should not crater your game. And this has been a sticking point in the franchise. So let's think it through a little. How does this work in real life, and why doesn't that translate into the franchise? Historically, there were two big things limiting expansion. The first was that there was no terra nullius. In Civ, the game spawns you in this big empty map you see right here, with no people in the between land between major nations. But in reality, there were people everywhere, and you couldn't just take their land. At least not without a fight. This is something the series can imitate, and games like Civ 4 and Civ 6 did a great job of making barbarians a real threat. In Civ 6, they are especially nasty, and it feels good to crush them. The second factor is stability, and this was the important one. Big empires like Rome, the Mongols, China, or Persia were very powerful, and they did not lag behind in culture and technology, but they would routinely just collapse and splinter into a bunch of pieces. I first saw stability in the Rise and Fall mod for Civ 4, which I really liked. Civ 6 does this a bit with loyalty, but it basically ends up just being a rehash of culture flipping from Civ 3 and Civ 4. The mechanic won't stop you from expanding much outside a narrow range of situations. Stability and collapse are crucial if you want your game to match history, but sadly, players just don't want you to add a mechanic where they lose half their cities. So, what do we do? Well, it's clear that expansion in a 4X game cannot match human history, and it will be unrealistic. So, if it's going to be unrealistic, it might as well be unrealistic in a way that gets the game to the place where the players want it to be. The ideal 4X game would have an expansion phase that is not a frantic land grab, but it also shouldn't punish you for expanding, and Civ 6 actually does manage to achieve this. It does this with a bunch of systems, but the crown jewel is a system of scaling costs. Districts get more expensive based on techs, civics, and existing districts. Settlers and builders have also become more expensive for each one that you've already built, and remember, builders have a fixed number of charges. This scaling system can create some weird incentives, and in terms of realism, it is just absolute nonsense. But it produces the desired result. Whatever other complaints you have about Civ 6, I think everybody has to concede the pace of expansion in this game just feels right, and it mimics the pace of expansion of successful empires from human history a lot better. Bigger in this game is better. Sometimes it makes sense to crank out a round of settlers, and sometimes it makes sense to do other things. You should expand, but you don't have to expand right now. There are other systems too. I've mentioned barbarians, which I love because they actually reward you for investing in the early game military, and they constrict players who spawn with a lot of empty land. Civ 6 also uses amenities and housing, which act as equivalents to like the health and the happiness mechanics from Civ 4. Housing works great, but I found that the clarity and the UI around amenities to be subpar. It's very good at telling you when you're having negative amenities, but a 20% bonus to all yields is huge, and the game does not do a good job of emphasizing whether or not you're getting it, and what things that you're doing are having an effect in which cities. Like, for example, the Retainer's Policy card, which gives you +1 amenities for garrisoning a unit in the city. I found myself wondering if it was working, or whether garrison meant something specific beyond what I had assumed. I mean, would it be so much for like a little happy face to appear when you put the unit in the city? I feel that's something that some game at some point might have done. Still, together, these form a robust set of incentives that make good planning during the expansion phase of the game feel so natural and rewarding. There's one last point related to the expansion phase that I'd like to talk about, and that is city-states. They take up real estate on the map, and they reduce the need to expand a bit. These have a bit of a mixed reception, but I love the idea here. In fact, in Civ 3, I love when the enemy AIs get beaten down to a position where they can't win, but they can very much still help you win. City-states can add depth to diplomacy and really make the map feel alive. That being said, I've noticed that in Civ 6 there's a lot of benefits to spawning next to city-states, but not a lot of drawbacks. They take up space and block your expansion, but they seem pretty simple to kill. In exchange for that, they block barbarians. Sometimes they send units to kill barbarians, like you see here. They provide a buffer with enemy civs, they provide trade opportunities, and they give you a ton of rewards through the envoy system. The bonus for contacting them first is actually massive, too. I think the idea here is to make the exploration phase of the game more exciting. Meeting city-states provides an incentive to get out on the map and discover things. I think that's really good. Exploration is my favorite part of Civilization, and it's not talked about enough. In Civ 3 multiplayer, I'm famous for loving archipelago maps. I love that everything is undiscovered, and that by exploring you find goodie huts, resources, choke points, angles of attack, and learn what your enemy is up to. Expansion is already great in Civ 6, so using city-states to reward exploration instead makes a lot of sense to me. That's all for today. I hope you liked my mini essay. What kind of expansion phase do you like? Let me know in the description to this video. Cheers.